Hi everyone, my name is Kat, or the Free Librarian, and welcome back to a new video. Today I will be talking about all the books I read in April. April wasn't the best reading month for me in terms of quality. I read 7 books. 2 of those were in Dutch, 5 in English. Good for a total of 3,247 pages. But out of those 7 books, I had 2 DNFs. I had 1 2-star, 1 2.5-star, 1 4-star, 1 4.5-star, and 1 5-star read. Usually I talk about my books in the order that I read them in. But that would mean for this month to end on a negative, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just gonna go from least favorite to most favorite, starting with my 2 DNFs. So the first DNF for this month is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I went into this knowing almost nothing. I knew that it had time travel. I knew that it had a strong romance component, and I knew that a friend of mine liked it. That was all I knew. I don't know what I expected, but I should have known that a romance from the 90s isn't always great in terms of consent and stuff. And also, the main character was married, so it would probably involve cheating, given that it was a romance. And it was just not something that I really cared for. And it was long. I didn't want to spend over 800 pages reading about someone cheating with questionable or even lack of consent, and then that being romanticized. So I quit. Unfortunately. The second DNF for the month was The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. This is one of the short story collections in the Sherlock Holmes series. And they felt very formulaic, and I don't know, I guessed almost all of them up until the point where I read, and I didn't care anymore. They just were all the same. They're predictable. I've gotten from the Sherlock Holmes books what I wanted from them, but I don't think this is a series that I want to continue reading in. Again, not because it's bad, but just because I don't care anymore. So those are the DNFs. It's a little unfortunate. Let's get into the books that I did finish. The first book that I'm going to talk about is one that I gave 2 stars, and that is Bodyguard of Lightning by Stan Nichols. This is the first book in the Orcs First Blood trilogy, which the first book came out in 1999, and then it was there. Most of them were early 2000s. There's also a sequel trilogy. This wasn't bad. It was a me problem. It was very plot driven and fast paced, and too plot driven and fast paced for me. I prefer to have more characters. The characters here weren't, they were very two-dimensional, very underdeveloped, and there was like a cartoon villain in it. So the characters weren't great. Also the world. There was one review on Goodreads that said that if the world felt very small, and I think that's a great way to put it. And also like that which there was your very basic medieval inspired world, which I don't mind. I like those every once in a while, but this one did nothing special for the world. And then also the themes weren't really the exploration of the themes wasn't great either. Like they were very surface level. Nothing new was being said, so the themes weren't really that well developed either. So that left like nothing that I care a lot about to be there, because I like plot, but in order to love a book, I need more than just the plot. I need characters to latch onto. I need an interesting world. I need themes, at least one of those. But it wasn't there. I also was quite disappointed that the actual plot of the book was not what I expected after reading the synopsis. It was just sort of a quest, like trying to find certain things rather than the orcs are taking their land back after the humans destroyed it, which would have been a very fun premise. And maybe that's what the rest of the series is about. I will never know because I'm not going to continue on. But this wasn't for me. So I gave it 2 stars. Next, I have Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. This also wasn't quite my thing. I enjoyed it more than Bodyguard of Lightning, and there were some very interesting ideas in this, but the execution was just not my taste. As I said, I don't love books that are too plot driven, that are too fast paced. And this was that. It was more like the characters were a lot better in this one than they were in Bodyguard of Lightning. So there were other things for me to latch onto, but it just didn't do enough for me to fully get into the story and to fully be invested in the story. I just felt that they were trying to cram too much into one book, which, like, the pacing was very fast, but it still felt too long. They just needed, like, less to happen in this book, I feel. I was kind of ready for it to be over by the end. I certainly don't think this is a bad book. And like this in a movie format or a TV show, I might like. It's just not something that I necessarily need in a book. And so I won't continue reading in this series either. I gave Leviathan Wakes 2.5 stars. Then I had Bloodmarked. And if you watch my vlogs, you know that Bloodmarked kind of broke me. And not in the way that most people mean when they say that a book broke them. I was so confused, and I didn't know what to think about it. I didn't know if I liked it or not. And there are still parts that I don't know if I like it or not. I still don't know if 4 stars is the right rating for this book, but I also don't know what else I would rate it, so that's that. I went into it a little hesitant because I had very mixed feelings on the first book. I liked some aspects, but I had some serious issues with that one. But I saw enough potential to continue. A lot of my issues were solved, um, which were mostly due to the fact that Patricia wasn't in this book because I really didn't like her character. But so a lot of the issues were solved, but it still wasn't. I still had issues with how things went down, especially the ending. I felt like this book wrapped up too much. And there is going to be a third book. I mean, there has to be because that was not like the ending of a series. But I don't know that there are enough loose ends to justify a complete novel that is left. Maybe the author surprises me, and it is going to be great. I don't know what she has planned for the third book, but just I personally cannot see how she's gonna squeeze an entire book out of that. So it's kind of the opposite of middle book syndrome. That instead of not resolving anything, this one resolved too much. I feel like. But yeah, I liked it. There were some dream sequences in his book, and there was one at the ending that was quite confusing in places. And there's like one thing, and to this day, I'm not sure if that actually happens or not. So yeah, that was a little confusing. So I don't know. This one is hard. I gave it 4 stars, which is what I usually give to a book that I liked, but I have some issues with it. And I feel like that's what fits this the best. Like a 3 feels too low. So like, yeah, that's my rating. I think. I'm not sure on it, but that is Blood Marks. Then I have The Garden Gnome by Jeff McIntyre, which I really enjoyed. This was so much fun. It's a contemporary fantasy with the most delightful little gnome in it, and we need more gnomes in fantasy. They're lovely, and I love this book. And it was just I loved it. I loved the ideas. This story is like magic returning to our world, but it's a negative thing, and we have people who are actively trying to avoid it, which I think is quite unique. I haven't seen that happen a lot. Usually, like if magic is returning to our world, that's usually seen as a good thing, but not necessarily here. But also not just one-sided. Like we see different sides of the conflict, I'll call it. So it's sort of hard to know who to root for. As in the goals, not like the way in which they try to achieve their goals, because let's not support those in some cases, but the end goals. I didn't know who the bad guys were and who the good guys were, so it was very nuanced, which I appreciate. And I really enjoyed it. I can't wait for the second book. So yeah, I gave this 4.5 stars. It was not quite a 5 because I did have a few problems here and there with it. Where like it was visible that it was a debut, but those were some nitpicks sometimes. It's definitely still a good book, and I highly, highly recommend. And then the last book, my favorite book of the month, is Six Coons and Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This is a retelling of, I can't remember what the story is called in English, but I'll put it on screen somewhere. But it was great. I liked the world in this, like the way the world building was done. It was very vibrant and colorful and whimsical, which I love. I love those worlds, and I love, there's like a little paper crane called Kiki, like little animal companion, and I loved her. She was a delight. And I like the plot in this. It was really fun. And like the romance, like nice and slow burn, and there was tension, but oh, I loved it. And I also liked how the author like used tropes and leaned into them just long enough to then turn them on their head. It was a delight. I want to read the second book. I bought the second book, so I'm gonna read it soon. But yeah, it was amazing. So I give this a well-deserved 5 stars. I loved it. Zarina can die a long and painful death, but I loved it. So yeah, that was the video. Those were the books I read. Have you read any of them? Let me know. And I will see you again in another video later. Bye.